here with another bedtime reading. Or I guess they're called bedtime stories. I'll be reading from Sapiens and War and Peace again today. I hope you've been enjoying my series from Jump King to this reading series. If you have any recommendations, I'd be glad to hear them and consider them. I have become aware of the fact that Nickelodeon All-Stars the game is coming out, and I might be trying that one on stream too. It looks like it's a lot of fun. I am, of course, a 90s kid. I am and will always be, and have always also been a fan of the Super Smash Bros. Series with Nintendo. And I can remember having so much fun playing the Super Smash Bros. Series of games with my friends growing up and later online. And yeah, it seems like it would be a lot of fun to play the Nickelodeon version, particularly with any of you. So yeah, we can definitely try it. Reptar. As a matter of fact, I can probably show you guys my Nickelodeon shirt that I recently got at some point, maybe when I'm first trying out the game, but yeah. Alright, we find ourselves in chapter 28, War and Peace. I think they are talking about Napoleon. I'm going to jump right in here. Prince Andrew was to leave next evening. The old prince, not altering his routine, retired as usual after dinner. The little princess was in her sister-in-law's room. Prince Andrew, in a traveling coat without epaulets, had been packing with his valet in the rooms assigned to him. After inspecting the carriage himself and seeing the trunks put in, he ordered the horses to be harnessed. Only those things he always kept with him remained in his room. A small box, a large canteen fitted with silver plate, 2 Turkish pistols and a saber, a present from his father who had brought it from the siege of Ochakov. All these traveling effects of Prince Andrew's were in very good order, new, clean, and in cloth covers carefully tied with tapes. If I'm not mistaken, I think Prince Andrew is preparing for war. His father is Old Tikhon. We had a chance to see some of their relationship in the previous chapter. Let's see what else Leo reveals to us in this chapter. When starting on a journey or changing their mode of life, men capable of reflection are generally in a serious frame of mind. True. Yeah, I'm finding myself in a similar circumstance as the one that Leo is describing here in War and Peace. I'm at a point of perhaps transition, a crossroads, if you will. At such moments, one reviews the past and plans for the future. And Prince Andrew's the same way here. Prince Andrew's face looked very thoughtful and tender. With his hands behind him, he paced briskly from corner to corner of the room, looking straight before him and thoughtfully shaking his head. Did he fear going to the war, or was he sad at leaving his wife? Perhaps both, but evidently he did not wish to be seen in that mood. For hearing footsteps in the passage, he hurriedly unclasped his hands, stopped at a table as if tying the cover of the small box, and assumed his usual tranquil and impenetrable expression. It was the heavy tread of Princess Mary that he heard. "I hear you've given orders to harness," she cried, panting. She had apparently been running. "And I did so wish to have another talk with you alone. God knows how long we may again be parted. You're not angry with me for coming. You've changed so, Andrusha," she added, as if to explain such a question. She smiled as she uttered his pet name, Andrusha. It was obviously strange to her to think that this stern, handsome man should be Andrusha, the slender, mischievous boy who had been her playfellow in childhood. "And where is Lise?" he asked, answering her question only by a smile. I would say it wasn't just a smile, like he's also just asked a question, but okay. She was so tired that she had fallen asleep on the sofa in my room. "Oh, Andrew, what a treasure of a wife you have," said she, sitting down on the sofa facing her brother. "She is quite a child, such a dear, married child. I've grown so fond of her." Prince Andrew was silent, but the princess noticed the ironical and contemptuous look that showed itself on his face. "One must be indulgent to little weaknesses. Who is free from them, Andrew? Don't forget that she's grown up and been educated in society, and so her position now is not a rosy one. We should enter into everyone's situation. Tout comprendre. C'est tout pardonner. Think what it must be for her, poor thing, after what she's been used to be parted from her husband and be left alone in the country. In her condition, it's very hard. And to understand all is to forgive all." Yeah, beautiful expression. I'll try to remember that one. It's like trying to understand things from every angle. And you'll be able to forgive more easily, because you'll know how the other person feels. Prince Andrew smiled as he looked at his sister, as we smile at those we think we thoroughly understand. "You live in the country and don't think the life terrible," he replied. That's different. Why speak of me? I don't want any other life, and can't, for I know no other. But think, Andrew, for a young society woman to be buried in the country during the best years of her life, all alone, for Papa is always busy, and you know that poor resources I have for entertaining a woman used to be the best society. There is only Mademoiselle Bourienne." "I don't like your Mademoiselle Bourienne at all," said Prince Andrew. "No, she's very nice and kind, and above all, she's much to be pitied. She has no one. To tell the truth, I don't need her, and she's even in my way. You know, I always was a savage, and now I'm even more so. I like being alone. Father likes her very much. She and Michael Ivanovich are the two people whom he is always gentle and kind, because he's been a benefactor to them both. As Sterne says, we don't love people so much for the good they have done us, as for the good we have done them." Perhaps old roommate felt the same way. Interesting expression, too. "Father took her when she was homeless after losing her own father. She is very good-natured, and my father likes her way of reading. She reads to him in the evenings, and reads splendidly. To be quite frank, Mary, I expect Father's character sometimes makes things trying for you, doesn't it?" Prince Andrew asked suddenly. He does have a very blunt way of putting things. He's very, like, the way some men are, just very blunt, very stern, somewhat cynical. Princess Mary was first surprised and then aghast at this question. For me? Trying for me?" said she. "He always was rather harsh, and now I should think he's getting very trying," said Prince Andrew, apparently speaking lightly of their father in order to puzzle or test his sister. "You are good in every way, Andrew, but you have a kind of intellectual pride," said the princess, following the train of her own thoughts rather than the trend of the conversation. "And that's a great sin." "How can one judge Father? But even if one might, what feeling except veneration could such a man as my father evoke? I am so contented and happy with him. I only wish you were all as happy as I am." Her brother shook his head incredulously. "The only thing that is hard for me, I will tell you the truth, Andrew, is Father's way of treating religious subjects. I don't understand how a man of his immense intellect can fail to see what is as clear as day, and go so far astray. That is the only thing that makes me unhappy. But even in this I can see lately a shade of improvement. His satire has been less bitter of late. And there was a monk he received and had a long talk with. Oh my dear, I'm afraid that you and your monk are wasting your powder," said Prince Andrew banteringly yet tenderly. "Ah, mon ami, I only pray, I hope that God will hear me. Andrew," she said timidly after a moment's silence, "I have a great favor to ask of you." "What is it, dear?" "No. Promise that you will not refuse. It will give no trouble and is nothing unworthy of you, but it will comfort me." "Promise, Andrusha," said she, putting her hand in reticule, but not yet taking out what she was holding inside it, as if what she held were the subject of her request and must not be shown before the request was granted. Like, you have to answer first. She looked timidly at her brother. "Even if it were a great deal of trouble," answered Prince Andrew, as if guessing what it was about. "Think what you please. I know you're just like father. Think as you please, but do this for my sake. Please do. Father's father, our grandfather, warred in all his wars." She still did not take out what she was holding in her reticule. "So you promise?" "Of course. What is it?" "Andrew, I bless you with this icon. And you must promise me you will never take it off." "Do you promise?" As we might recall, I believe Princess Mary is deeply religious. "If it does not weigh 100 weight and won't break my neck." "To please you," said Prince Andrew, but immediately noticing the pained expression his joke had brought to his sister's face, he repented and added, "I am glad, really, really, dear, I'm very glad. Against your will he will save and have mercy on you and bring you to himself, for in him alone is truth and peace," said she in a voice trembling with emotion, solemnly holding up in both hands before her brother a small oval antique dark-faced icon of the Savior in a gold setting on a finely wrought silver chain. I have thought it always interesting the value that some religious people put in the significance of different icons. Things like rosaries and stuff like that. Yeah. It's like to some people some things have a lot of significance and others they don't have any significance at all. She crossed herself, kissed the icon, and handed it to Andrew. "Please, Andrew, for my sake." I guess what I'm trying to say is it's a little superstitious in a way. It's like, it's my lucky coin with Jesus' face on it. Rays of gentle light shone from her large, timid eyes. Those eyes lit up the whole of her thin, sickly face and made it beautiful. Her brother would have taken the icon, but she stopped him. Andrew understood, crossed himself, and kissed the icon. There was a look of tenderness, for he was touched, but also a gleam of irony on his face. "Thank you, my dear." She kissed him on the forehead and sat down again on the sofa. They were silent for a while. "As I was saying to you, Andrew, be kind and generous as you always used to be. Don't judge Lise harshly," she began. "She's so sweet, so good-natured, and her position now is a very hard one. I do not think I have complained to my wife to you, Masha, or blamed her. Why do you say all this to me?" Red patches appeared on Princess Mary's face, and she was silent as if she felt guilty. "I've said nothing to you, but you've already been talked to, and I'm sorry for that," he went on. The patches grew deeper on her forehead, neck, and cheeks. She tried to say something, but could not. Her brother had guessed right. The little princess had been crying after dinner and had spoken of her forebodings about her confinement, and how she dreaded it, and had complained of her fate, her father-in-law, and her husband. After crying, she had fallen asleep. Prince Andrew felt sorry for his sister. "Know this, Masha, I can't reproach, have not reproached, and never shall reproach my wife with anything. And I cannot reproach myself with anything in regard to her, and that always will be so in whatever circumstances I may be placed. But if you want to know the truth, if you want to know whether I am happy, no. Is she happy? No. But why is this so? I don't know." As he said this, he rose, went to his sister, and stooped kissing her forehead. His fine eyes lit up with a thoughtful, kindly, and unaccustomed brightness, but he was looking not at his sister, but over at her head towards the darkness of the open doorway. "Let us go to her, I must say goodbye, or go and wake and I'll come in a moment. Petrushka," he called to his valet, "come here. Take these away. Put this on the seat and this to the right." Princess Mary rose and moved to the door, then stooped and said, "Andrew, if you had faith, you would have turned to God and asked him to give you the love you do not feel, and your prayer would have been answered." Now, Princess Mary is also the equivalent of Russian royalty. I think that people with certain levels of privilege have a heightened chance of being religious. They tend to believe in God more because they've led fortunate lives. Like, they've had either good looks, wealth, the opportunity to go to a lot of great schools. They may or may not be a celebrity. They may have certain degrees of fame and or fortune. That could also cause them to believe that God is responsible. Like, it must be the case that there is a God because so many things in my life are going right. God grants prayers because XYZ happened to me. And I think Princess Mary's that way. It's like your Russian royalty. That could be part of the reason why you believe in God. You're not a peasant. You're not struggling in life. The more you struggle, I think the harder it is for you to believe in religious entities. Yeah, she's like, you would ask God to give you the love that you don't feel. He would answer your prayer. Well, we'll see how Prince Andrew responds. "Well, maybe," said Prince Andrew. "Go, Masha, I'll come immediately." On the way to his sister's room in the passage which connected one with the other, Prince Andrew met Mademoiselle Bourienne smiling sweetly. It was the third time that day that, with an ecstatic and artless smile, she had met him in secluded passages. "Oh, I thought you were in your room," she said, for some reason blushing and dropping her eyes. Prince Andrew looked sternly at her, and with an expression of anger suddenly came over his Prince Andrew looked sternly at her, and an expression of anger suddenly came over his face. He said nothing to her, but looked at her forehead and hair, without looking at her eyes, with such contempt that the Frenchwoman blushed and went away without a word. When he reached his sister's room, his wife was already awake, and her merry voice, hurrying one word after another, came through the open door. She was speaking as usual in French, and as if after long self-restraint she wished to make up for lost time. "No, but imagine the old Countess Zubova, with false curls and her mouth full of false teeth, as if she were trying to cheat old age. Ha ha! Ha ha ha! Mary." This very sentence about Countess Zubova and the same laugh Prince Andrew had already heard from his wife in the presence of others some 5 times. He entered the room softly. The little princess, plump and rosy, was sitting in an easy chair with her work in her hands, talking incessantly, repeating Petersburg reminiscences and even phrases. Prince Andrew came up, stroked her hair, and asked if she felt rested after their journey. She answered him and continued her chatter. The coach with 6 horses was waiting at the porch. It was an autumn night, so dark that the coachman could not see the carriage pull. Servants with lanterns were bustling about on the porch. The immense house was brilliant with lights shining through its lofty windows. Domestic serfs were crowding in the hall, waiting to bid goodbye to the young prince. The members of the household were all gathered in the reception hall. Michael Ivanovich, Mademoiselle Bourienne, Princess Mary, and the little princess. Prince Andrew had been called to his father's study as the latter wished to say goodbye to him alone. All were waiting for them to come out. When Prince Andrew entered the study, the old man in his old age spectacles and white dressing gown, in which he received no one but his son, sat at the table writing. He glanced round. "Going?" And he went on writing. "I've come to say goodbye. Kiss me here, and he touched his cheek. Thanks, thanks. What do you thank me for? For not dilly-dallying and not hanging to a woman's apron strings. The service before everything. Thanks, thanks. And he went on writing, so that his quill spluttered and squeaked. They used, I believe, like feathers, like plumes for writing. Back in those days, they didn't have pens and pencils. Quills, yeah. If you've anything to say, say it. These two things can be done together, he added. About my wife, I'm ashamed as it is to leave her in your hands. Why talk nonsense? Say what you want. On her confinement is due, send to Moscow for an accoucheur. Let him be there. Can I reference it? Accoucheur. Accoucheur is a male midwife. Okay. The old prince stopped writing and, as if not understanding, fixed his stern eyes on his son. I know that no one can help if nature does not do her work, said Prince Andrew, evidently confused. I know that out of 1,000,000 cases, only one goes wrong. But it is her fancy and mine. They have been telling her things. She's had a dream and is frightened. Muttered the old prince to himself, finishing what he was writing. I'll do it. He signed with a flourish, and suddenly turning to his son began to laugh. It's a bad business, eh? What is bad, father? The wife, said the old prince briefly and significantly. I don't understand, said Prince Andrew. No, it can't be helped, lad, said the prince. They're all like that. One can't unmarry. Don't be afraid, I won't tell anyone, but you know it yourself. He seized his son by the hand with his small bony fingers, shook it, looked straight into his son's face with keen eyes which seemed to see through him, and again laughed his frigid laugh. The son sighed, thus admitting that his father had understood him. The old man continued to fold and seal his letter, snatching up and throwing down the wax, the seal, the paper, with his accustomed rapidity. What's to be done? She's pretty. I will do everything to make your mind easy, said he in abrupt sentences while sealing his letter. Andrew did not speak. He was both pleased and displeased that his father understood him. The old man got up and gave the letter to his son. Listen, said he, don't worry about your wife. What can be done shall be. Now listen. Give this letter to Michael Ilarinovich. There Leo goes again, introducing new characters. Like, first there was Michael Ivanovich, and now there's Michael Ilarinovich. It's like, okay, another character. Draco. I've written that you should make use of you in proper places and not keep you long as an adjutant. A bad position. Tell him I remember and like him. Write and tell me how he receives you. If he is all right, serve him. Nicholas Bolkonsky's son need not serve under anyone if he is in disfavor. Now come here. Kutuzov. He spoke so rapidly that he did not finish half of his words, but his son was so accustomed to understand him. He led him to the desk, raised the lid, drew out a drawer, and took out an exercise book filled with his bold, tall, close handwriting. I shall probably die before you, so remember these are my memoirs. Hand them to the Emperor after my death. Now here is a Lombard bond and letter. It is a premium for the man who writes a history of Severov's wars. Send it to the Academy. Here are some jottings for you to read when I'm gone. You'll find them useful. Andrew did not tell his father that he would no doubt live a long time yet. He felt that he must not say it. I will do it all, father, he said. Well, now goodbye. He gave his son his hand a kiss and embraced him. Remember this, Prince Andrew, if they kill you, it will hurt me. Your old father. He paused unexpectedly. And then in a querulous voice suddenly shrieked. But if I hear that you have not behaved like a son of Nicholas Bolkonsky, I shall be ashamed. So that must be the grandfather, I'm guessing. You need not have said that to me, father, said the son with a smile. He's like, don't worry about it.
I'll be okay. The old man was silent. I also wanted to ask you, continued Prince Andrew, if I'm killed and if I have a son, do not let him be taken away from you, as I said yesterday. Let him grow up with you, please. Not let the wife have him, said the old man, and laughed. They stood silent, facing one another. The old man's sharp eyes were fixed straight on his son's. Something twitched in the lower part of the old prince's face. We've said so, goodbye. We've said goodbye, go. He suddenly shouted in a loud, angry voice, opening his door. He's like, why do we keep rattling about, why do we keep talking to each other? He's like, if you're gonna go out to war, just go. It does seem like they've been, just battling on and on in this chapter. This is a long chapter, yo. Jeez, Leo, we need quick scenes with a lot of action in it. What is it? What? Asked both princesses when they saw for a moment at the door Prince Andrew. And the figure of the old man in a white dressing gown, spectacled and wigless, shouting in an angry voice. Prince Andrew sighed made no reply. He's like, there you go again. Ticking off your old man by having long conversations with him. And keep in mind, this conversation's it's kind of what's, how's it said, pointless. It's a pointless conversation. If you die in war, you may or may not be able to control yourself dying in war. How well you carry yourself on the battlefield is what's going to decide whether or not you die in the war. Prince Andrew sighed and made no reply. Well, he said, turning to his wife, and yeah, if you're on the front lines, you're not really, there's not really a whole lot you can do on the front lines. Not be on the front lines is how you don't die in war. Well, he said, turning to his wife, and this well sounded coldly ironic, as if he were saying, now go through your performance. Andrew, already, said the little princess, turning pale and looking with dismay at her husband. And what is the name of the princess? It's not Princess Mary, right? Is it Borean? Is that who his wife is? Leo just keeps saying princess. It's okay, what is her name? We need to know what her name is to help us build the association between these characters. It's without that, it's which princess? It's most of this novel so far has focused on the royal family. It's everyone is a prince and princess over here. Everyone is. You can't just say princess, because it's okay, which princess? Is it Prince Mary? Is it, Princess Anna Karagovna? Which one is it? Andrew, already, said the little princess, turning pale and looking with dismay at her husband. He embraced her. She screamed and fell unconscious on his shoulder. Seems a bit melodramatic, if you ask me. He cautiously released the shoulder she leaned on, looked into her face, and carefully placed her in an easy chair. Adieu, Mary, said he gently to his sister, taking her by the hand, kissing her, and then he left the room with rapid steps. Okay, so here he's explaining, finally. The little princess lay in the armchair, Mademoiselle Bourienne chafing her temples. Okay, so yeah, it is Mademoiselle Bourienne, right? This is Prince Andrew's wife. Princess Mary would be his sister. Princess Mary, supporting her sister-in-law, still looked with her beautiful eyes full of tears at the door through which Prince Andrew had gone, and made the sign of the cross in his direction. Yeah, she's religious as heck, too. She's like Mother Teresa. She's like the Russian equivalent of Mother Teresa, this Princess Mary. She's bigger though than Mother Teresa is. That from Leo's characterization of her. From the study, like pistol shots, came the frequent sound of the old man angrily blowing his nose. Hardly had Prince Andrew gone when the study door opened quickly and the stern figure of the old man in the white dressing gown looked out. Gone? That's all right, said he, and looking angrily at the unconscious little princess, he shook his head reprovingly and slammed the door. Okay, book 2 is 1805. So I am of the belief that Mademoiselle Bourienne is also a princess, based on what Leo is saying here. It's like Princess Mary and Princess Mademoiselle Bourienne. Princess Mary is not the one who's unconscious, because if she was unconscious, how is it possible that she's making the sign of the cross? And like that is probably one of the most confusing things about War and Peace for me personally, is like how many characters there are to keep track of. I almost have to I almost have to refer to Spark Notes to keep track of who all these people are. It's like Prince Andrew, Prince Mary, Princess Mary, Mademoiselle Bourienne, Pierre, Old Tikhon, Nicholas, what is his name? Nicholas Volkonsky. So many characters. And the war hasn't even started yet. It's like they're all just like sitting around in some, Russian mansion, or Russian palace, and they're all just talking about the war. They're like, oh yeah, Napoleon seems like a war dog, doesn't he? Like, yeah, but he's pretty darn good at it, I'll tell you that. Looking at history, it's like he knew what he was doing. Maybe it may not seem that way when he tried to invade Russia, but for the rest of the Napoleonic Wars, it really did seem like Napoleon knew what he was doing. And yeah, it kind of makes me wonder if Napoleon had instead, it's like one of those historical hypotheses. It's like, what if Napoleon had instead tried to take over the UK instead? Like, what if he instead tried to take on the British forces? Would he have had better luck? I'm led to believe that he would have, because if I'm not mistaken, he made it as far as Moscow, I'm pretty sure, Napoleon. I might be wrong about that. But yeah, he actually had a lot of success. The Grand Army. Yeah, lasted 6 months. The Grand Army lost 300,000 soldiers versus Russia's 200,000. But part of that was because of Russia's war strategy. They had back then was called a scorched earth strategy, where they destroy all the crops, which limits the French's access to food and supplies. Like, one of the most valuable resources in wartime are resources. Food, stuff like that, water, supplies. And once you cut those supply lines, it's like you can quickly and easily rout your enemy. And the French just were not fighting on their home field advantage, their home turf. We're about to start with Sapiens, guys. I'm just recapping here pretty quick. Yeah, here it says, on the 14th of, and this is based on what I'm reading on the Wikipedia page. On the 14th of September, Napoleon and his army of about 100,000 men occupied Moscow, only to find it abandoned, and the city was soon ablaze. Napoleon stayed in Moscow for 5 weeks, waiting for a peace offer that never came. But Yeah, compare that to Operation Barbarossa. If I hope I'm saying that right. Operation Barbarossa. Barbarossa. Sorry, I wasn't saying that right. Nazi Germany also tried to invade Russia, and they did not do as well as Napoleon did. So I think that speaks volumes to Napoleon's level of military talent. Like, that dude he was a savvy general. Like, he knew what he was doing. Like, he was really good. Yeah, Operation Barbarossa is what it was called. The German invasion of the Soviet Union. And Germany did not get as far as the French did in the Napoleon era. Oh, man, but yeah. Yeah, different strategy though. Napoleon probably could have conquered even more grounds. Yeah, the UK. Like, if he instead went to the UK, who knows how history would have played out differently. And part of the reason why the UK was able to win the war against Napoleon is because they were funded by the Rothschilds. They got a lot of money flooded in so that they could win the war, the UK. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff. Like, you can read all about it. Like, dang, it's crazy. But yeah, I could maybe even argue that Napoleon was the most savvy military commander during that time period. Like, he was pretty much a badass in history. Like, Napoleon he was good. Here's my remote. He was good. Napoleon was. Okay. Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at Sapiens. Yeah, War and Peace. Pretty dang fascinating look by Leo Tolstoy of what the Russian sphere was like then, during that era. Pretty dang cool. Okay, we're picking up Sapiens from the Return of the Neanderthals. And yeah, history is one of those things that, like, it's so information dense. Like, all the different battles and all the different major historical events. It's like, I feel like there's never any way even true historians can ever really know everything there is to know. And that's why, like, certain historians choose to focus on specific periods. Like, some historians focus on the 19th century, some focus on the 20th century, some focus on the 21st century, some focus on the medieval period, and history itself is, like, chunked into different eras because there are so many events that happen from a historical perspective that it's like just so much information. Oh boy. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of info. Okay, let's see what Yuval says for today in The Return of Neanderthals. Last time in Sapiens we were talking about bioengineering and natural selection. I am of the belief that natural selection is still in effect for Homo sapiens. We have not yet evolved to the next iteration of our race. We haven't evolved to the next stage. That gap could be bridged through the use of bioengineering, as Yuval's claimed in his book Sapiens, and I agree with that. I believe natural selection is still in effect based on the choices that men and women make. Men like physically attractive women with nice bodies that shows that they're able to undergo childbirth. Women like status, things that reflect like strength, height, funniness, intellect. It's like those choices show that natural selection is still in effect. Tall guys, like anytime you see a woman with a tall guy, you know that she made that choice to choose the guy that's tall because there's the belief that he'll be better at protecting and providing. It's like those instincts are still there. Like it's all still there. Natural selection is still in effect. And it's played out all the time through choices that men and women make. Okay, anyway, return of Neanderthals. But geneticists do not only want to transform living lineages, Yuval writes. They aim to revive extinct creatures as well. And this is also something I think is really cool. Another cool application of science is trying to revive extinct species. Because sadly, also as Yuval's written about in his book, a lot of species have been brought to extinction as a result of human activity, unfortunately, and just natural processes. Based on what Darwin is saying, it's like the best survive, it's the survival of the fittest. The species that are not the fittest, like the short-necked giraffes, eventually go extinct. They simply cannot survive. Their lines cannot continue because they are simply not the most competitive. And it's like, it plays out all the time in our world. Like, even businesses are that way too, where it's like the least competitive businesses eventually go out of business. Like a Blockbuster, for example, it's like they simply cannot continue. Dog eat dog world, yo. Like, but yeah, some of these species that went extinct, like the dodo, we may be able to use their DNA, extract their DNA, and restart their species. We may even have the ability someday to do that with the dinosaurs, like create a real life Jurassic Park with sufficient enough advances in technology, using DNA that still exists from those time periods. They aim to revive extinct creatures as well, not just dinosaurs as in the Hollywood blockbuster Jurassic Park. A team of Russian, Japanese, and Korean scientists has recently mapped the genome of ancient mammoths, found frozen in the Siberian ice. They now plan to take a fertilized egg cell of a present-day elephant, replace the elephantine DNA with a constructed mammoth DNA, and implant the egg in the womb of an elephant. After about 22 months, they expect the first mammoth in 5,000 years to be born. And keep in mind, this book was written back in 2014. So it could be the case. Let me look it up, that this mammoth already exists today. Like the experiment has already been performed. Hang on a second. 22 months. Let's see. Recreated mammoth. Yeah, there's the woolly mammoth revival. Just looking through a few quick articles online. Scientists say they could bring back woolly mammoths. This is an NPR article. But maybe they shouldn't. Someone's writing. Even if they were to use this method to recreate mammoths, based on how they're doing it, it wouldn't be a true mammoth, right? Because the egg is being implanted in an elephant. So I would think that in practice it would be a half elephant, half mammoth hybrid using the method that they're using. It would not be a true woolly mammoth. And yeah, they're writing this NPR article about using recovered DNA to resurrect extinct species. They're saying, should we? I would say, why not? why not increase biodiversity on the planet? And yes, there are people who can just as easily counter argue that if they went extinct, it's for a reason. It's because they could not evolve, they could not adapt. But that's not entirely fair to say, right? Because if they're hunted to extinction by humans, some species simply can't outlast humanity, right? Like humans, compared to their species, we're just made too smart. Like we found out how to make tools, we found out how to make guns. Like how are they going to adapt to that? Like they can't. They could not adapt in time, and so they went extinct. Like how is that fair to their species? It wasn't really fair to their species that they were hunted to extinction by humans. Why can't we and why shouldn't we fix the mistake that our species made in driving them to extinction? Like, why shouldn't we do that? Humans are basically jerks. If you look at everything that has happened in the scope of the existence of our species, like we basically made a lot of animals go extinct. All the megafauna of Australia gone, wiped out by humanity. Maybe we should use science and technology to give some of those species a second chance. I think we should anyway. Some say reintroduced mammoths could help reverse climate change. Another solid reason why we would bring them back. But yeah, we definitely would have to do our part this time to be good stewards, protect these animals so that they don't face the same fate again. We don't make the same mistake twice. But yeah, I personally think that we would need major advances in technology before we could recreate these animals. And of course, there's the argument mammoths might upset existing ecosystems. That is true. We always need to consider the effect of introducing new animals into existing ecosystems. If you look at like the bullfrog in Australia, it's like the Australian bullfrog, like they introduced it. Let's see, am I remembering this right? Cane toads. They introduced these toads to control the population. Let me make sure I'm giving out the right information. Yeah, they brought in the cane toads to Australia from Hawaii in an attempt to control the native gray-backed cane beetle. But unfortunately, it did not have the intended effect. Cane toads started spreading and they started eating stuff other than the cane beetle. And it basically messes up the environment when that happens. It's like, oopsie, it's eating things that it's not supposed to eat, and now it's like messing up the environment, and like, yeah, destabilizing everything. That could happen again, which is why we would need careful monitoring around any species that are introduced into existing ecosystems to ensure that it's not destabilizing that ecosystem, as was the case with cane toads in Australia. But yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's anything else to say on this while we're here at this juncture. Comes back to stewardship, though. It's like monitoring the animal, kind of like what they do with current endangered species. It's like tracking the growth patterns of the animals, the habitat of the animal. It's like, what is the scope of this species? What type of territory would this animal occupy? Trying to see if there's any main takeaways from this, so I'm not, just spending the entire stream reading through back information. But predicted 6-year timeline would be exceptionally short. I would actually agree on that. It's probably gonna be 10, 20 years minimum before we develop the scientific advances necessary for the true recreation of some of these species, because it requires a lot of gene sequencing, DNA research, that kind of stuff. Bioengineering, yes. Alright, let me continue in Sapiens. Yeah, what's strange is that this says after about 22 months. 22 months is a little under 2 years. And this book was written back in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. Originally published in 2011. So yeah, I'm gonna be right back. I guess if you use the bathroom. Okie dokie, and we are back. Okay. Let's see here, where am I? Yeah, mammoths. Bring the mammoths back from the dead. Yeah, I was thinking, so this experiment would have been completed about 2013, but let me keep reading. Maybe there'll be more information in the book. But why stop at mammoths? Professor George Church of Harvard University recently suggested that with the completion of the Neanderthal Genome Project, we can now implant reconstructed Neanderthal DNA into a sapiens ovum, thus producing the first Neanderthal child in 30,000 years. Church claimed that he could do the job for a paltry 30 million. Several women have already volunteered to serve as surrogate mothers. Wow. Why would you want to, though? It's like, for $30 million, I will build a VCR. It's like, why? It's like, we have TVs now. We have, let me make sure I'm making the right parallels. It's like, we've got streaming now. And it's like, yeah, you could say like in radios. It's like radios, we have TVs now. We have smart TVs now. We have 4K TVs now. Why would we want those old style radios. To study them, to put them in a zoo. Neanderthals in practice are going to seem like very smart, more advanced chimps, basically. More advanced monkeys. It's like, if you want to see them, you can see them in the zoo already. They're chimps and gorillas. That's basically what they're like, with the ability to use tools in primitive forms of language. They do not have the ability to imagine things and create stories. They're not that smart to do that. But yeah, apparently women are already like, sure. Based on what Juval's right here. Okay, yeah, and then he asks the question, what do we need Neanderthals for? Some argue that if we could study live Neanderthals, we can answer some of the most nagging questions about the origins and uniqueness of Homo sapiens. By comparing a Neanderthal to a Homo sapiens brain and mapping out where their structures differ, perhaps we could identify what biological change produced consciousness as we experience it. I guess I could see it maybe from that angle, like we can use it as a going off point. It's like, this is how how we adapted from Neanderthals to Homo sapiens. Maybe that can help us fathom the way and means with which Homo sapiens will evolve to the next step or stage in our what's it called? In our biological family tree. There's an ethical reason too. Some have argued that if Homo sapiens was responsible for the extinction of Neanderthals, it is a moral duty to resurrect them, as I've somewhat already argued. And having some Neanderthals around might be useful. Lots of industrialists would be glad to pay one Neanderthal to do the menial work of two sapiens. Ha ha ha. It does remind me in a way of like that book Frankenstein. It's like Frankendoodle and all the different movies and stuff that are made about that. It's like it's like, I don't know, see what you can learn from monkeys and chimps, because that orangutans, like that will tell you about the history of our species. Like, we could use different types of tools. But why stop even at Neanderthals? Why not go back to God's drawing board and design a better sapiens? The abilities, needs, and desires of Homo sapiens have a genetic basis. And the sapiens genome is no more complex than that of voles and mice. The mouse genome contains about 2.5 billion nucleobases, and sapiens genome is about 2.9 billion, meaning that the latter is only 14% larger. In the medium range, perhaps in a few decades, genetic engineering and other forms of biological engineering might enable us to make far-reaching alterations not only to our physiology, immune system, and life expectancy, but also to our intellectual and emotional capacities. If genetic engineering can create genius mice, why not genius humans? I think that should be the focus of science, medicine, technology, improving the quality of life of humans as we exist today. Like, I don't know, recreating things in the past could benefit that process, but how and in what ways, it's not immediately clear. If we can create monogamous voles, why not humans hardwired to remain faithful to their partners? I'm not even entirely sure why that would be necessary. It's like, we already have the means to do that. The cognitive revolution that turned Homo sapiens from an insignificant ape into the master of the world did not require any noticeable change in physiology, or even in the size and external shape of the sapiens' brain. it apparently involved no more than a few small changes to internal brain structure. Perhaps another small change would be enough to ignite a second cognitive revolution, create a completely new type of consciousness, and transform Homo sapiens into something altogether different. True, we still don't have the acumen to achieve this, but there seems to be no insurmountable technical barrier preventing us from producing superhumans. The main obstacles are the ethical and political objections that have slowed down research on humans. No matter how convincing the ethical arguments may be, it is hard to see how they can hold back the next step for long, especially if what is at stake is the possibility of prolonging human life indefinitely, conquering incurable diseases, and upgrading our cognitive and emotional abilities. I really don't see the point, reason, or rationality behind allowing humans to live forever, but making humans better intellectually and emotionally, I can only see the advantage of that. Like, why wouldn't we want to live more complete lives? I think better lives is a good driver. Better lives don't necessarily mean longer lives, but it could mean happier lives, more productive lives. And yeah, science could definitely help with that. What would happen, for example, if we developed a cure for Alzheimer's disease that, as a side benefit, could dramatically improve the memories of healthy people? Would anyone be able to halt the relevant research? When the cure is developed, could any law enforcement agency limit it to Alzheimer's patients and prevent healthy people from using it to acquire super memories? It's unclear whether bioengineering could really resurrect the Neanderthals, but it would very likely bring down the curtain on Homo sapiens. Tinkering with our genes won't necessarily kill us, but we might fiddle with Homo sapiens to such an extent that we would no longer be Homo sapiens. And might I add, how freaking awesome would that be? Like, what if we could be Superman? What if we could be the Flash? What if we could be as smart as Professor X? Start moving stuff around with our minds. Like, that'd be freaking awesome, right? Like, come on, let's do it. It just takes time, research spending, a bunch of religious yoo-hoos that not get in the way, and we can do it. Alright, next time, bionic life. Yeah, we'll see what else he has to say. Cyborg engineering, AI, the future of AI. There are also ethical questions and concerns about artificial intelligence, speculative fiction like Terminator and Space Odyssey raise the question, like, what if AI gets out of control? And I don't know, I'm personally of the opinion and belief that it won't happen unless it's programmed that way. I do think that Siri technology is advancing at an alarming rate, and it'll be very important for us to continue to understand the technologies that we create. I think that is going to be extremely important. It's like, know the scope of your creation, of your inventions, of your technologies like Siri and Alexa. They're already listening to us all the time. To what extent do we want that functionality in our lives? And yeah, it's very much similar. AI is very similar to bioengineering, and that it could, when applied correctly, could dramatically improve our lives. And yeah, all it takes is proper application, the correct application of those technologies, of those resources. And yeah, we might need oversight committees and stuff like that to make sure it's being introduced in a way that is responsible and socially conscious. Alright, but food for thought. Storm Champions. Like I said, Nickelodeon Smash game is coming out, so we might be playing it here on the show. Stay tuned. Stormer Show signing off.